Sign this. I'm done with this useless marriage.
Please, not now. I need you more.
Pack your stuff, so I don't want to see you here when I'm back.
After a devastating accident that left wife crippled, husband divorced wife. But what happened next? Distinguished viewers, welcome to Luxury True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more amazing real-life luxury stories. Now, let's get into the story. Anita Newton was born in a quiet town in Northern California, a place where tree-lined streets and modest homes reflected a simple but stable life. Her father, Robert Newton, worked as a civil engineer known for his discipline and integrity. Her mother, Margaret Newton, was a compassionate nurse who believed kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. Their home was never extravagant, but it was filled with warmth, patience, and long conversations at the dinner table about honesty, loyalty, and responsibility. From a young age, Anita listened carefully to those conversations, absorbing lessons about trust and human nature that would later shape her understanding of people. As a child, Anita was observant and thoughtful. While other children were often loud and impulsive, Anita preferred quiet moments of reflection. She loved reading books about human behavior and spent hours sketching in a notebook she carried everywhere. Her drawings were not just landscapes or flowers. She often drew people, studying expressions and emotions carefully. Margaret sometimes joked that Anita could read a person's feelings faster than most adults. At school she was intelligent but humble, often helping classmates with their work rather than competing for attention. Teachers described her as calm, perceptive, and emotionally mature beyond her years. Anita also grew up very close to her younger brother, Lucas Newton, who had a completely different personality. Lucas was energetic, curious about technology, and constantly experimenting with computers and software. Their differences made them a perfect balance. Anita offered patience and understanding, while Lucas brought laughter and creativity into the household. Their parents encouraged both children to pursue their dreams while never forgetting the importance of loyalty to family. By the time Anita finished high school, she had already decided she wanted to study psychology, fascinated by the complexity of human decisions and relationships. She believed understanding people was the key to building meaningful connections. What Anita could not have known was that one day her own understanding of love and loyalty would be tested in a way that would change the course of her entire life. Daniel Clement grew up in a completely different world from Anita Newton. His childhood unfolded in a crowded industrial city where opportunity was scarce and survival often depended on determination. His father, Henry Clement, had once served in the military and believed discipline was the only path to success. Henry spoke little but expected much. Every mistake Daniel made as a child was corrected with stern lectures about strength and independence. Daniel's mother, Eleanor Clement, was quiet and emotionally distant, often keeping to herself while working long hours at a small accounting office. The household was not cruel, but warmth was rare, and affection was something Daniel learned to live without. From an early age, Daniel became obsessed with escaping poverty. While other teenagers spent time relaxing after school, Daniel worked small jobs wherever he could. He delivered newspapers at dawn, stocked shelves in grocery stores during evenings, and spent nights studying business magazines he borrowed from libraries. He was fascinated by stories of entrepreneurs who had built empires from nothing. To Daniel, success meant control over money, respect, and security. His father's constant reminders about strength shaped Daniel's thinking deeply. Henry often said, "The world only respects those who win." Those words stayed in Daniel's mind as he slowly began to build his own ambitions. By the time Daniel reached his late 20s, his relentless determination began to pay off. He started a small transportation service with only one used truck and a borrowed office space. At first the company struggled, and Daniel often slept inside his office while negotiating contracts during the day. Yet his persistence slowly attracted attention from larger clients who admired his efficiency and discipline. Over time the business expanded into a growing logistics company, handling shipments across several states. Daniel finally began to taste the success he had dreamed about since childhood. But with success came a new hunger, one that pushed him to seek more wealth, more influence, and a life far removed from the hardships he once knew. The evening Anita Newton met Daniel Clement was calm and elegant, the kind of night where conversations flowed easily beneath soft lights and quiet music. The event was a charity fundraiser held at a cultural center in San Francisco, organized to support rehabilitation programs for patients recovering from severe injuries. Anita had volunteered to help coordinate the event because the cause was close to her heart. Her mother's years as a nurse had introduced Anita to many patients whose lives had been changed by accidents, and she believed strongly in helping them rebuild their confidence and independence. Dressed in a simple but graceful navy blue dress, Anita moved through the hall greeting guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly. Daniel Clement attended the event for a completely different reason. His growing logistics company had recently begun attracting attention from investors and corporate partners, and charity events were excellent opportunities to build connections with influential people. Daniel arrived in a tailored black suit, confident and composed, carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone who had fought hard for his success. While he respected the purpose of the fundraiser, his mind was also focused on the networking opportunities around him. Business leaders, investors, and consultants filled the room, discussing deals and partnerships over glasses of wine. Their first meeting happened unexpectedly. Anita was adjusting a display table near the entrance when Daniel approached to ask about the program schedule. At first the conversation was simple and polite, but within minutes something unusual happened. Daniel noticed that Anita listened carefully, not just to respond but to truly understand what he was saying. Anita, in turn, sensed a determination behind Daniel's confident exterior, a seriousness that suggested his success had not come easily. What began as a short exchange turned into a long conversation about work, personal values, and the balance between ambition and compassion. For Daniel, Anita's calm intelligence was refreshing compared to the competitive personalities he usually encountered. For Anita, Daniel's drive and resilience were intriguing. Neither of them realized it at the time, but that quiet conversation in a crowded room marked the beginning of a relationship that would eventually change both of their lives. After their first meeting at the fundraiser, Daniel and Anita continued seeing each other often. What began as occasional conversations quickly grew into regular dinners, long evening walks, and hours of discussion about their goals and beliefs. Daniel admired Anita's calm intelligence and the way she spoke thoughtfully about people and emotions. Anita, in turn, respected Daniel's determination and the discipline that had carried him from a difficult childhood to building his own successful company. Their personalities were different, yet they complemented each other in a way that felt natural. Daniel began introducing Anita to parts of his world that few people had seen. He showed her the offices of his growing logistics company, the busy warehouses, and the trucks that moved goods across states under contracts he had worked tirelessly to secure. Anita listened carefully as he explained every step of the business, impressed by the effort and strategy behind his achievements. In return, Anita shared her own interests with Daniel. She spoke passionately about psychology, human behavior, and the importance of empathy in relationships. Sometimes she took him to volunteer programs where injured patients were learning to rebuild their confidence after life-changing accidents. At first Daniel felt out of place in those environments, but Anita's sincerity gradually opened his mind to perspectives he had rarely considered. Over time their connection deepened into something stronger than admiration. They began to rely on each other emotionally. Daniel, who had grown up in a household where emotions were rarely expressed, found himself becoming more open around Anita. She had a way of listening without judgment that made him feel understood. Anita, who had always believed that loyalty was the foundation of love, felt reassured by Daniel's commitment to building a stable future. Friends and family noticed how naturally they fit together. Lucas Newton joked that Daniel was the only person patient enough to keep up with Anita's thoughtful debates, while Margaret Newton quietly hoped the relationship would bring lasting happiness to her daughter. Slowly but surely, their relationship moved beyond casual dating and towards something far more serious. As months passed, the relationship between Danielle Clement and Anita Newton grew stronger and more meaningful. Their lives began to blend naturally, as if two different paths had quietly merged into one shared journey. Anita often visited Danielle's office after finishing her classes, bringing coffee while he worked late reviewing contracts and planning new business routes. Danielle, in turn, made time to attend events Anita cared about, including community volunteer programs and small gatherings with her family. The more time they spent together, the more they realized how deeply they trusted each other. To Anita, Danielle represented strength and stability. To Daniel, Anita represented something he had rarely experienced in life, genuine emotional understanding. One autumn weekend, Daniel planned a short trip to a quiet mountain retreat outside the city. He told Anita it was simply a break from the stress of work and daily responsibilities, but in reality he had spent weeks preparing for something much more important. The retreat was peaceful, surrounded by tall pine trees and a clear lake that reflected the golden colors of the season. They spent the day walking along forest trails, talking about their childhood memories, their families, and the dreams they still hoped to achieve in the future. Anita spoke about her goal of helping people through counseling and emotional support programs. Daniel spoke about expanding his company into a national logistics network. As the sun began to set, the quiet landscape around them created a calm moment neither of them would ever forget. Standing near the lake, Daniel finally revealed the small velvet box he had been carrying in his coat pocket. For a moment Anita simply stared at him in surprise, her thoughts racing as she realized what was happening. Daniel, usually confident and composed, spoke with unusual sincerity as he explained how much her presence had changed his life. He admitted that before meeting her, success had been his only priority, but Anita had shown him the importance of trust, partnership, and emotional connection. Then he asked her to marry him. Anita felt a wave of emotion she could barely describe. The future she had once imagined suddenly felt real and close. Without hesitation, she accepted. As the evening sky darkened above the quiet lake, their engagement marked the beginning of a new chapter, one built on promises of love, loyalty, and a shared future they both believed would last forever. The months following Daniel's proposal were filled with preparation, excitement, and the joyful anticipation of two families coming together. Anita's parents, Robert and Margaret Newton, welcomed the engagement warmly, believing Daniel's determination and Anita's compassion created a balanced partnership. Lucas Newton, always playful, teased his sister endlessly but secretly admired Daniel's work ethic and the respect he showed toward the family. On Daniel's side, his father Henry Clement remained reserved, expressing approval in his usual firm but quiet manner. Eleanor Clement attended the wedding planning meetings politely, though her calm demeanor revealed little emotion. Despite their differences, both families agreed on one thing: Daniel and Anita seemed deeply committed to building a life together. The wedding took place in a beautiful garden venue outside the city, surrounded by blooming flowers and soft summer sunlight. Friends, relatives, and Danielle's growing circle of business partners gathered to celebrate the union. Anita walked down the aisle with graceful confidence, her eyes filled with both happiness and determination for the life she was about to begin. Daniel stood waiting with a composed smile, though those who knew him well could see the rare emotion behind his calm expression. When they exchanged vows, their promises were sincere and heartfelt. Anita promised loyalty and unwavering support, while Daniel promised protection, partnership, and a future built on trust. The ceremony ended with applause, laughter, and a celebration that continued late into the evening. Married life began with optimism and shared goals. Daniel's logistics company was expanding rapidly, securing larger contracts and hiring more employees. Long hours became part of his routine, but Anita understood the demands of his ambition. She supported him by maintaining balance in their personal life while continuing her own interests in psychology and community work. Sometimes she volunteered at rehabilitation centers, helping patients regain confidence after difficult injuries. Daniel admired her dedication even if he didn't always fully understand it. In quiet moments at home, they spoke about the future, about building a family someday, and about Daniel turning his company into a national enterprise. Those early months of marriage were filled with warmth, laughter, and the belief that their partnership could overcome anything. Neither of them imagined how dramatically their lives would change in the years ahead. As Daniel Clement's logistics company continued expanding, the demands of running the business became more complex. New contracts required careful planning, international shipping routes needed coordination, and investors began taking interest in the company's rapid growth. Daniel realized he needed stronger strategic guidance to handle the next stage of expansion. After weeks of searching for experienced advisors, he decided to bring in a corporate consultant who specialized in helping growing companies scale their operations. That decision introduced someone who would later become deeply involved in his personal life as well, Caroline Pattison. Caroline Pattison arrived with an impressive reputation. She was known in corporate circles as a highly skilled strategist who had helped several companies restructure and expand into new markets. Confident, articulate, and sharply observant, she carried herself with a level of professionalism that immediately earned attention in the office. During her first meeting with Daniel, she quickly analyzed the company's logistics network, identifying weaknesses in distribution routes and suggesting improvements that could increase profits significantly. Daniel was impressed by how quickly she understood the business. Within days, she had already begun implementing new systems that streamlined operations and increased efficiency. While Caroline focused intensely on the company's development, she also spent many hours working directly with Daniel. Their meetings often extended late into the evening as they reviewed financial reports and expansion plans. Caroline admired Daniel's determination and leadership, while Daniel appreciated her strategic thinking and confidence. Meanwhile, Anita noticed that Daniel's schedule was becoming increasingly demanding. He spoke often about Caroline's ideas and how her strategies were helping the company grow faster. Anita was happy to see the business succeed, yet she quietly observed the new dynamic forming within Daniel's professional world, unaware that Caroline's presence would eventually influence far more than just company strategy. Caroline Pattison quickly became one of the most influential people inside Daniel Clement's company. Her strategies began producing visible results within weeks. Shipping routes became more efficient, contracts were renegotiated with stronger profit margins, and new clients started approaching the company after hearing about its rapid transformation. Employees noticed the change in atmosphere as well. Meetings became more structured, deadlines more precise, and decisions more aggressive. Caroline moved through the office with calm authority, speaking with confidence that made people listen carefully. Daniel admired how easily she handled pressure and how clearly she saw opportunities others often missed. Because of the intense workload, Daniel and Caroline spent long hours together reviewing reports and planning future expansions. Many evenings they remained in the office long after most employees had gone home. Their conversations gradually moved beyond spreadsheets and contracts into discussions about ambition, leadership, and personal experiences. Caroline spoke openly about her career path, explaining that she had spent years building her reputation in competitive corporate environments where only the most determined individuals succeeded. She believed this success required focus and sacrifice. Daniel found himself agreeing with much of what she said. Her perspective reminded him of the mindset he had developed while struggling to escape poverty years earlier. At home, Anita began noticing subtle changes in Daniel's routine. He returned later than usual and often seemed mentally occupied with business plans. When he spoke about work, Caroline's name appeared frequently in his explanations about new strategies and company growth. Anita listened quietly and remained supportive, proud that Daniel's company was expanding so quickly. Yet her natural sense of observation made her aware that the rhythm of their life was slowly shifting. Daniel was becoming more immersed in the world of competition and ambition that Caroline seemed to represent. Though nothing openly troubling had happened yet, Anita could sense that something within Daniel's priorities was beginning to change. As Danielle's company continued expanding, the rhythm of life inside their home slowly began to change. Danielle's schedule grew heavier with meetings, strategy sessions, and frequent business dinners with investors and corporate partners. Some evenings he returned home long after midnight, his mind still occupied with numbers, contracts, and expansion plans. Anita tried to remain supportive, reminding herself that Daniel had worked for years to build the company to this level. Success often required sacrifice, and she understood that pressure. Still, she quietly noticed that the balance between Daniel's professional life and their personal time was gradually fading. Anita had always been a careful observer of people. Her studies in psychology had trained her to recognize subtle changes in behavior, small details that others often ignored. She noticed how Daniel sometimes checked his phone repeatedly during dinner conversations, how he spoke about company strategy with unusual urgency, and how Caroline Patterson's name frequently appeared in his explanations about new business decisions. Daniel always described Caroline as a brilliant consultant whose strategies were helping the company grow faster than expected. Anita listened calmly each time he mentioned her, asking polite questions about the progress of the business. On the surface everything sounded normal, yet Anita could sense a shift in Daniel's emotional presence. Instead of confronting Daniel directly, Anita chose patience. She believed relationships required understanding rather than immediate suspicion. Over the following weeks she simply paid attention to the patterns around her. She watched how Daniel's priorities seemed increasingly focused on expansion and profit, how he rarely spoke about the quiet future they had once imagined together. At the same time, Anita continued her own activities, volunteering at rehabilitation programs, spending time with her family, and maintaining the calm routine she valued. Yet beneath her composed exterior, a quiet question had begun to form in her mind. She wondered whether Daniel's ambitions were slowly reshaping the man she had once believed she knew completely. One rainy evening, Anita left a community rehabilitation center where she had spent the afternoon helping patients adjust to physical therapy routines. The sky was dark, and the streets were slick with rain as she carefully drove home through the quiet city roads. Traffic was lighter than usual, and the sound of rain tapping against the windshield created a calm rhythm inside the car. Anita's mind was occupied with thoughts about the patients she had met that day and the small progress some of them had made in their recovery. She believed strongly in resilience and the strength people discovered during difficult moments. What happened next would shock everyone who knew her. At an intersection not far from the highway, a speeding vehicle suddenly appeared from the opposite direction. The driver lost control on the wet road, and within seconds the collision occurred. The crash was loud and violent, sending Anita's car spinning before it finally came to a stop near the roadside barrier. Emergency responders arrived quickly, their flashing lights illuminating the dark street as they carefully removed Anita from the damaged vehicle. She was conscious but unable to move her legs, her voice weak as she tried to explain what she was feeling. The scene was chaotic, with paramedics working quickly while police secured the area. Anita was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors began a series of examinations. Hours later, Daniel arrived at the hospital after receiving the shocking news. He waited anxiously in the corridor as medical staff moved quickly between rooms. When the neurologist finally came to speak with him, the doctor explained that Anita had suffered severe trauma affecting her lower body. The early signs suggested serious damage that could affect her ability to walk. Daniel listened in stunned silence as the reality of the situation slowly settled in. The life he and Anita had built together suddenly felt uncertain. Inside the hospital room, Anita lay quietly in bed, surrounded by medical equipment, while the future of their marriage and their lives together began to change in ways no one could yet fully understand. The days following Anita's accident were filled with hospital visits, medical consultations, and quiet uncertainty. Doctors performed several examinations to understand the extent of the injury, while specialists discussed treatment options and rehabilitation plans. Anita remained calm during the process, speaking softly with the nurses and doctors who attended to her. Though she appeared composed, The atmosphere around her hospital room was heavy with concern. Daniel spent the first few days constantly at the hospital, sitting beside her bed and asking the doctors detailed questions about recovery possibilities. Yet as the reality of long-term care slowly became clearer, the weight of the situation began pressing heavily on him. Medical specialists explained that recovery would require patience, therapy, and significant emotional support. Anita might need months or even years of rehabilitation before knowing the full outcome of her condition. Daniel listened carefully but seemed increasingly overwhelmed by the responsibility being described. Running his rapidly expanding company already demanded most of his time and energy, and now the possibility of becoming a full-time caregiver created a pressure he had never imagined facing. Though he tried to remain supportive during his visits, small signs of frustration began appearing in his voice and expressions. Anita quietly observed these changes. Her calm demeanor never wavered when Daniel visited, and she continued speaking with the same gentle confidence he had always known. Yet she noticed how his visits slowly became shorter as business demands called him back to the office. Phone calls interrupted their conversations, and meetings forced him to leave earlier than planned. While Anita assured him she understood the pressures of his work, the emotional distance between them gradually began to grow. The accident had not only affected her physical condition, it had begun to reveal the true strength of their marriage, testing promises that had once seemed unbreakable. While Anita remained in recovery, Daniel's attention increasingly returned to the growing pressures of his company. Important contracts required his presence, investors demanded progress reports, and new expansion plans were being discussed almost daily. Caroline Pattison remained at the center of those discussions. Her strategies continued improving the company's performance, and many employees began seeing her as Daniel's most trusted advisor. Long meetings filled the schedule, often stretching late into the evening as they analyzed market opportunities and potential partnerships. Caroline noticed the strain Daniel was carrying. During one late meeting in his office, she spoke calmly about the situation he was facing. She acknowledged how difficult Anita's condition must be but suggested that Daniel also had to protect the company he had spent years building. Caroline's words were carefully chosen, never openly critical of Anita, but subtly guiding Daniel's thinking. She spoke about responsibility, leadership, and the reality that major businesses often required complete dedication. Daniel listened quietly, already feeling the pressure between his personal life and professional obligations. Over time those conversations began shaping Daniel's perspective. Each time he visited the hospital, the quiet atmosphere of recovery reminded him of how drastically life had changed. Meanwhile, the energy and momentum inside the office continued pushing forward. Caroline remained close to him during this period, offering advice on both business decisions and how to manage difficult situations. What began as professional guidance slowly turned into personal influence. Without fully realizing it, Daniel was allowing someone outside his marriage to shape the way he viewed his responsibilities and his future. Months passed, and Anita was eventually moved from the hospital to a rehabilitation facility where specialists focused on long-term recovery. The quiet center was peaceful, filled with patients working patiently through therapy sessions designed to rebuild strength and mobility. Anita adjusted to the routine with calm determination. She spent hours each day speaking with therapists, reading books, and observing the struggles of other patients around her. Despite the challenges, she remained emotionally steady, greeting visitors with the same composed warmth she had always shown. But Daniel's visits had become less frequent. When Daniel finally arrived one afternoon, the conversation between them felt heavier than usual. He sat across from Anita in the small rehabilitation room, his expression serious and distant. For several moments he struggled to speak, choosing his words carefully. Eventually he explained that the situation had become overwhelming for him. Running the company demanded constant attention, and the future he had once imagined now felt uncertain. Daniel spoke about pressure, responsibility, and the life he believed he could no longer manage while carrying the weight of Anita's condition. Anita listened silently as he finished explaining his decision. Daniel told her he wanted a divorce. The words hung quietly in the room, creating a stillness that neither of them immediately broke. Anita's face remained calm, though the emotional meaning of his decision was unmistakable. Daniel spoke about moving forward, about how both of them deserved a different path now that life had changed so dramatically. When he finally left the rehabilitation center that day, the marriage that had once been filled with promises of loyalty and partnership had officially come to an end. Anita remained seated quietly by the window, watching the fading light outside, while a new chapter of her life quietly began. Several weeks after the divorce was finalized, Anita Newton left the rehabilitation center quietly with the assistance of a private transportation service arranged by her family. To anyone watching, it appeared that she was simply continuing her recovery at home. Her parents welcomed her warmly, providing the support and privacy she needed during this difficult time. Friends who knew about the accident expressed sympathy and concern, believing Anita was still facing a long journey of physical healing. Anita accepted their kindness with quiet gratitude, maintaining the calm and patient demeanor she had shown since the accident. However, behind closed doors, the situation was very different from what most people believed. One evening Anita sat comfortably in the living room with her parents and her close friend Olivia Grant, the lawyer who had quietly helped her manage the legal details of the divorce. Slowly, Anita stood up from her chair and walked across the room without assistance. The room fell silent for a moment, not out of shock, but because they all understood what that moment represented. Anita had never truly lost the ability to walk. The accident had been real, but the severity of her condition had been carefully exaggerated as part of a difficult test she had chosen to conduct. Anita explained calmly that she had wanted to understand the true strength of her marriage when faced with adversity. Her studies of human behavior had taught her that people often reveal their deepest character during moments of crisis. By allowing Daniel to believe she might never walk again, she had hoped to see whether the promises of loyalty he once made would remain strong. Instead, the situation had exposed a painful truth about the limits of his commitment. Though the realization was difficult, Anita felt a quiet sense of clarity. The marriage had ended, but the test had revealed exactly what she needed to know about the man she once trusted completely. After revealing the truth to her family and close friend Olivia Grant, Anita Newton began quietly rebuilding her life. The weeks following the divorce were not filled with anger or dramatic reactions. Instead, Anita approached her new reality with the same calm clarity that had always defined her personality. She spent time with her parents at their peaceful home, taking long walks through the neighborhood and slowly returning to the routines she had once enjoyed. Her mother, Margaret, often reminded her that difficult experiences sometimes revealed strengths people never realized they possessed. Anita also began reconnecting with activities that had once brought her purpose. She returned to volunteering, this time at a rehabilitation center owned by Grace Whitmore, a respected professional who specialized in helping people regain confidence after traumatic events. Grace quickly noticed Anita's unusual level of emotional insight when speaking with patients. Rather than simply offering encouragement, Anita listened carefully to their fears and frustrations, helping them understand their own emotional responses to sudden life changes. Many patients felt comforted by her calm presence and thoughtful advice. Meanwhile, Olivia Grant remained closely involved in Anita's transition into this new phase of life. As a skilled lawyer and longtime friend, Olivia helped Anita manage the financial matters related to the divorce settlement. Daniel had assumed Anita would quietly move on with her life after the marriage ended. What he did not realize was that Anita possessed both intelligence and determination strong enough to build a completely new future. With the support of her family, her friends, and her growing sense of independence, Anita began exploring new opportunities that could transform her understanding of human behavior into something meaningful and powerful. Over the next year, Anita Newton quietly transformed her life in ways few people expected. The emotional pain of her divorce did not disappear overnight, but instead of allowing it to define her future, she turned it into motivation. Her deep understanding of human behavior, combined with the lessons she had learned from her own experience, inspired her to pursue a professional path she had once only considered as a distant idea. Anita began developing a consulting service focused on emotional intelligence, leadership behavior, and decision-making under pressure. With guidance from Olivia Grant and support from her family, Anita established a small consulting firm that worked with organizations and individuals seeking to improve leadership relationships and workplace communication. Her ability to read subtle emotional signals and understand hidden motivations quickly attracted attention. Clients appreciated how clearly she explained complex human behaviors and how she helped leaders recognize the consequences of their decisions. Word of her work slowly spread, bringing new opportunities and partnerships. Anita remained humble throughout the process, focusing more on meaningful impact and recognition. As her professional confidence grew, Anita also regained a strong sense of personal independence. She continued working with Grace Whitmore's Rehabilitation Center, occasionally speaking with patients about resilience and emotional recovery. Many people found inspiration in her calm strength and thoughtful advice. Though the chapter of her life involving Daniel Clement had ended, Anita no longer viewed the experience only through the lens of loss. Instead, she recognized it as a moment that revealed both the fragility of trust and the strength she possessed to rebuild her life on her own terms. While Anita quietly rebuilt her life, Daniel Clement remained fully focused on expanding his company. For a time, the business continued growing under the aggressive strategies introduced by Caroline Pattison. New contracts were signed, international routes were added, and the company's reputation in the logistics industry seemed stronger than ever. Daniel felt confident that the difficult decisions he had made in his personal life had allowed him to concentrate completely on success. Caroline remained closely involved in every major decision, often reminding Daniel that strong leaders sometimes had to make painful sacrifices. However, the rapid expansion soon began revealing hidden weaknesses. Some of the new contracts Caroline had negotiated carried risks that were not immediately obvious. Several partners demanded faster delivery schedules that strained the company's resources, and operational costs began increasing more quickly than expected. Daniel noticed small financial irregularities appearing in quarterly reports, but Caroline assured him the problems were temporary adjustments during a period of growth. Trusting her expertise, Daniel continued pushing forward with expansion plans. Within months, those small issues began growing into serious complications. A shipment delay caused by poor planning resulted in a major client canceling a contract. Another partner demanded compensation for missed deadlines. Investors who had once been enthusiastic about the company's growth began asking difficult questions about financial stability. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the uneasy pressure of uncertainty creeping back into his life. The business empire he had spent years building was beginning to show signs of instability, and the confidence he once placed in every decision was slowly being replaced by doubt. As Daniel struggled to stabilize his company, unexpected information reached him through a source he had not anticipated. One afternoon he received a call from Victor Langston, a business rival who had competed with Daniel's company for several major contracts over the years. Their relationship had always been professional but distant. Victor requested a private meeting, explaining that he had recently come across something Daniel might want to know. Curious and slightly cautious, Daniel agreed to meet him at a quiet restaurant away from the busy financial district. During the meeting, Victor spoke calmly but directly. Through industry connections and casual conversations with medical professionals, he had heard an unusual story about Anita Newton's accident and recovery. According to what Victor had learned, Anita had never suffered permanent paralysis. The severity of her condition had been misunderstood, or possibly presented differently, during the months following the accident. Victor had no personal reason to involve himself in Daniel's past marriage, but he believed Daniel deserved to know the truth after hearing the rumors repeatedly within professional circles. Daniel sat silently as the information settled in his mind. The idea seemed impossible at first. For months he had believed Anita's injury had changed their lives permanently, influencing the difficult decision he had made to end the marriage. Yet Victor's calm explanation planted a troubling possibility. If Anita had not been permanently crippled, then the situation surrounding their divorce carried a very different meaning. As Daniel left the meeting later that evening, the questions in his mind grew heavier with each step. For the first time since the accident, he began to wonder whether the choices he had made had been based on a reality he had never fully understood. Unable to ignore the questions now filling his mind, Daniel Clement finally decided to seek answers directly from the only person who could explain everything, Anita Newton. After several days of hesitation, he contacted her office and requested a meeting. By this time Anita's consulting firm had grown into a respected organization, and her schedule was carefully managed by a small professional team. When the message reached her, Anita paused for a moment before calmly agreeing to meet him. The meeting was arranged at her office, a modern but simple space that reflected the quiet confidence she had developed since rebuilding her life. When Daniel arrived, he immediately noticed how different everything felt. Anita greeted him politely but without the warmth that had once defined their relationship. Her posture was confident, her voice calm, and her presence carried a quiet authority. They sat across from each other in her office as Daniel finally asked the question that had been troubling him. He explained what he had recently learned, that the accident might not have left her permanently crippled as he had believed. Anita listened without interruption, her expression composed. After a long pause, she confirmed the truth. Anita explained that while the accident had been real, the severity of her condition had been intentionally exaggerated. She had wanted to understand whether Daniel's promises of loyalty would survive a difficult reality. Instead, the situation had revealed how quickly he was willing to walk away when life became complicated. Daniel struggled to respond, realizing that his decision to divorce her had unknowingly become the final answer to the test she had created. Anita spoke without anger, simply explaining that the experience had given her clarity about the kind of partnership she deserved in life. The meeting ended quietly, leaving Daniel with the weight of understanding how his own choices had permanently changed the course of their relationship. After the meeting, Daniel Clement left Anita's office with a heavy sense of realization. The quiet confidence he had once carried now felt replaced by a deep awareness of the choices he had made. Walking through the busy streets outside the building, he reflected on the years he had spent chasing success and control. The divorce had once seemed like a practical decision made during a difficult time, but now he understood that it had revealed something deeper about his priorities. The marriage he once believed he could leave behind had instead become the clearest measure of his character. Inside her office, Anita remained calm after Daniel departed. The conversation had not reopened old wounds as Daniel might have expected. Instead, it simply confirmed the clarity she had already gained over the past year. Through her work, her independence, and the support of those who truly cared for her, Anita had built a life grounded in confidence rather than dependence. Her consulting firm continued growing, and the people she worked with respected her ability to understand human decisions and emotional resilience. The difficult test she had once designed had ended painfully, but it had also freed her to move forward without uncertainty. As the months passed, Anita focused on expanding her work and continuing her involvement with the rehabilitation center where she often volunteered. She spent time with her family, strengthened friendships, and embraced opportunities that allowed her to help others understand the importance of loyalty and integrity in relationships. The chapter of her life that involved Daniel Clement had ended, but it no longer defined her future. Instead, it became one of the many experiences that shaped the person she had become. For Anita Newton, life had moved into a new beginning, one built on wisdom, independence, and the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. And that brings us to the end of today's story. The world of luxury often hides stories deeper than what meets the eye. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories on Luxury Jewel Stories. Until our next story, take care and stay tuned for more.